expect that to become more. Expect Turkey to become a big part of it. Expect Iran to become a big part of it. And anybody else that we don't have a friendly relationship with is going to find themselves at home with the BRICS nations. And in doing so,
welcome back to the Kevin Estopanol Show, y'all. We got a very special guest, a new friend of mine. Just met him, Mr. Kenny Webster of the Walton and Johnson Show. Kenny, what's happening, man?
Greetings, brother. Thanks for having me here. You sound like you're in Louisiana, Kevin.
New Orleans. You hit the nail on the head, Kenny.
There's a very specific accent you only hear on the North Shore near Covington or in Long Island, New York.
Yeah, it's crazy. I get that so much. I get Long
Island,
New York. Why?
Do you know why?
That? No,
because that's where your people are from. Because hundreds of years ago, and forth, and those were rich people lived on the Upper East Coast, or they lived near New Orleans, and so that's why your voice sounds like that, because of hundreds of years, and it just kind of stayed that way because people at some point quit migrating. People stayed either in the North Shore or in Long Island, and that's why you get that accent.
Oh no, man! It's like, I instantly recognize somebody from New Orleans, or same thing like you just did. Like if I go out to eat somewhere in another state and somebody's from here, they instantly know me. But dude, you know what's wild about y'all? Like when I was a kid, I was listening to Walton and Johnson like in my dad's truck, like as a kid, and it's crazy. Like, from the diverse topics, all the voices, all the little skits, like it just stuck with me so much, man. It's just crazy to see because I don't listen to the radio anymore. It's just awesome. Y'all are still going and kicking, man. That's awesome.
The show is bigger than it's ever been. The podcast is downloaded, I think, about 1,500,000 times a month between streams and direct downloads. We have 19 affiliates. We continue the John Walton legacy. John hasn't been part of the show for almost 5 years, sadly, but we've managed to build and grow the show posthumously since John's left. And, we're very proud to have kept the name the same because John, he was the godfather of it. He created the whole format for us.
Yeah, and when I was a kid, I'd listen to it, and I didn't realize that, was it in New Orleans at one time, and it moved to Houston, or because it was always played in New Orleans. I was a kid, I just assumed it was in New Orleans.
It's a long story, and Steve could tell it better because I wasn't always a part of it. I've been with the show now for almost 13 years. But the show's existed for 40, and it started a year after I was born, but it was in Beaumont, Texas was the original place where it started. It went to New Orleans, it went to New York City, it went to Dallas, it went back to New Orleans, it went to Houston, and then in the syndicated era, it's pretty much been all over the South. So we would say it's the biggest regional morning radio show in the South. There are bigger shows out there, obviously, but not bigger ones that are just exclusively in the South as a morning show.
Yeah, and it's crazy, like just thinking about like where we are now and the stuff that, y'all were talking about on Walton and Johnson when I was a kid. It's like, we're still dealing with some of the same stuff. We're dealing with inflation, we're dealing with the border, we're dealing with, a more divisive country than we've ever had.
Yeah, those problems are worse than they've ever been. We have these moments of insanity where we think, how is this still happening? We explained the solution to this to people 5, 6, 10, 15 years ago, and enough people seem to agree that it was a problem, but there weren't enough people out there who wanted to do something about it. And part of the problem, it's twofold, because on one hand, to fix a problem, you have to acknowledge that it's an issue. If you ever knew anybody in a 12-step program, but that's the first step. The first step to admitting you have an addiction issue. The first step to solving an addiction issue is admitting you have an addiction issue. And the first step to acknowledging to solving an inflation problem or an immigration problem or a crime problem is acknowledging the problem exists. But then it's twofold in the sense that, yes, you've acknowledged it, but now you have a group of people that make a living off of claiming to solve this problem. They call themselves politicians. And if they actually solve the problem, they no longer have relevancy. They no longer suit a purpose to us. If they go out and solve the immigration problem, what good are they to us, right? And so they know that. So by doing nothing, they remain relevant.
Yeah. And it seems that, whether it's inflation that, I actually saw a tweet that you had put up earlier, showing that, the cost of living, how much it's gone up. And let me share the my screen and I'm gonna show you. You had tweeted this, and what do you think the reason is for this? So this is the 1962 cost of living, and average income $5,000. A new house was $12,000. Like what? Like so, what exactly do you think happened? Like how could we get this far away from this standard of living in 1962.
Okay, so it's a few things going on, but they all relate to each other.
Mm-hmm.
In the big picture here, and this doesn't answer how it happened, but why it happened, the ruling class seeks to destroy the middle class, right? If we're all poor, if we're all living on welfare, if we're all middle class people are of no use to them because middle class people have monetary power. We have influence. We have the ability to pick up and leave, right? We're not wealthy. We don't have private jets, but we have enough money to sell our homes, buy an RV, drive somewhere else, vote with your feet. Poor people don't get to do that. You know, I'm lucky. I grew up an hour from Chicago in a small town out in the middle of the Midwest, and I didn't like it. So I got up and I moved to Texas, a neighbor of Louisiana. And, you know, politically a little different than Louisiana, but becoming very similar thanks to Governor Landry, but not to get off subject here. So the reason why is to destroy the middle class, but how is a little different. We used to be on something called the gold standard, and the gold standard worked. That was the problem with the gold standard. The problem with the gold standard is that it kept us out of inflation, but it didn't keep us out of inflation alone, right? By getting off the gold standard and getting onto fiat currency, we now have paper money that we could print out with this magic machine. And it sounds good, right? But one of our biggest problems as Americans is we're trying to replace a system that works with something that sounds good, a system that's clearly not perfect, capitalism and a representative republic. We're trying to replace with a system that sounds good, but doesn't work at all. And that's socialism and like raw democracy, which is what communism essentially is. It's not a good thing. And so by creating a system based on fiat currency, which just basically means paper money with no backing, they could spend as much as they want, willy-nilly, as with what you could say it's without consequences, but it's clearly not without consequences because now we have this inflation crisis, right? So what happened between now and 1964 or between now and 1971 when we got off the gold standard is they printed out a lot of money, like Drake at a strip club. They were just printing out money, just throwing it all over these hoes, right? And they're printing it out like crazy. And every time they print another $1 million with no backing on it, that money in your bank account, even though you're saving money, even though you're trying to keep money there, it loses its value. That's just a basic economics 101, supply and demand. And so, you know, if you have $1 million, it's worth $1 million. But if you print out another $1 million and put it out into the circulation of our global economy, suddenly that money loses some of its value. But here's what didn't change. The amount of gold, the amount of oil and gas, the amount of hamburger meat, right? The amount of cheese, the amount of wheat, whatever the commodity is, that hasn't necessarily changed. So there's more paper money, but the amount of everything else stayed the same. So the paper money value went down. Now, I want you to imagine how insane this is. Roughly 40% of the money, the American dollars in circulation right now, did not exist before the pandemic. Think about that. That means that the dollar has lost almost half of its value. Now, it isn't quite as simple as that. It's a little more complicated than that because not all that money's in circulation. Some of it's being hoarded away in Warren Buffett's bank account, but a lot of it's out there. So we all applauded the federal government. I mean, I didn't, but a lot of people applauded the federal government when they started giving out stimulus checks during the pandemic. Everybody got their $1,200 or whatever. I mean, I didn't. I made just enough money where I didn't get that, right? The upper middle class gets first. Can I swear in this show or not?
Yeah, you good.
Okay,
man.
I'm used to terrestrial. They get screwed worse. Sorry if you want to use this clip on social media for the kiddos. The upper middle class needs to be the first to go, right? They're the biggest problem. Then the middle class, then the working class, to the point where we're all in the low income bracket. But to get us there, fiat currency is a great way to do it. Because lo and behold, little by little, they're taking away spending power. Now, the ruling class, the elites are smart enough to realize in the short term, this is a way to diminish our numbers. This is a way to turn the upper middle class into the middle class, into the working class, into the lower class. But they don't think deeply enough to realize what the end goal is. In the long run, the Mark Cubans, the Warren Buffetts, the Bill Gates, they will be on the guillotine. Their heads will be chopped off. Not by me, right? I don't have a problem with wealthy billionaires. I don't. But the people that will be killed when the Marxist revolution comes, when the so-called utopia happens, those guys will be the first to go. And strangely enough, they're the ones that open the door and let the Marxist parasites in. And oddly enough, it happened with backdoor capitalism. Like this is something that Milton Friedman talked about, but didn't necessarily predict. The way that the communists will destroy our society is by coming in through the back door. It's like with the slave labor in China, right? Or petro states like Iran and Russia, screwing with the energy industry by manipulating the numbers using OPEC, right? Milton Friedman said, there needs to be a little bit of regulation. It can't just be anarchy, right? It needs a little bit of regulation, but as little as possible. And he died, 20 years ago, so he didn't quite predict this. For those that don't know who Milton Friedman is, he's a brilliant economist who was smart enough to say, capitalism's great, but we don't necessarily need complete anarchy. He was considered to be an anarcho-capitalist, but he wasn't necessarily. And if you read his books, you'll see he had very common sense ideas about simple, scaled down regulation. And if we'd listened to people like Milton Friedman or Ron Paul, we wouldn't be in this predicament right now.
Yeah, Ron Paul's definitely somebody that's been saying the same thing for so long, to end the Fed, audit the Fed. And, now, like you said, with the money that's now printed in the circulation, like, is the damage too far gone that, like, we're coming up to an election? Does it even matter who's president at this point? I mean, if the economy and the money's ruined, is it really even going to matter who's the president?
Okay, so you're asking a question about the red pill, blue pill, black pill moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the black pill. It's over, we're doomed, sweet meter of death, kill us all. And it's fun to joke about that, but I'm an optimist. I look at that glass as being half full. The problem is, to solve this problem, there's nobody in charge right now that's offering real solutions. I'm a Javier Milei Republican. You look at this guy in South America right now that just took over in Argentina. He's a combination of libertarianism and right-wing populism. Mm-hmm. And he's figured it out. Vivek Ramaswamy, I don't know if he's a grifter. I don't know if he's sincere, but he's figured it out. Whether he really believes what he's saying or not, I don't know. But what he's saying out loud will solve our problems. You have to deregulate. We have to disband some of these government institutions, right? The Federal Reserve needs to go, right? The Energy Department needs to go. We can't have that anymore. We can rebuild. We could start over again, but we need constitutional amendments that put these organizations in check, because the executive branch gives them the power to do whatever they want without Congress getting in the way. One way to solve the inflation crisis is to collect a lot of money in taxes and then don't spend it. Take it out of circulation. Put it into the furnace. Burn it. They're never going to do that. I mean, don't say never, but the people in charge right now probably won't do it. The question is this, Kevin. Will they figure that out before we become a third world country? And I hope the answer is yes.
Well, it seems that we are going that direction. And it seems that, whether it's the immigration issue, like, it just seems like the system is going to collapse. At some point, this is not sustainable. What we're doing right now is not sustainable. Now, yeah, like you said, if we have a whole new revolution and we open up our energy sector and we open up, to Bitcoin and digital currencies, maybe we can do stuff to stop inflation, to slow it down. But their only solution is just going to be just to print more money. Want a war with Russia? Print more money. War with Hamas? Print more money. That's the only answer, which is going to just lower our standard of living.
Yeah. And, to quote Wu-Tang Financial, diversify. That's it. Like, you have monetary value as a member of the middle class. I don't know how much money you have, but I know, if you have anything, right? If you could afford to buy artwork or computers or printers, you could probably afford to buy oil and gas, gold, silver, platinum, raw commodities. I know I could see you like Bitcoin. I like Bitcoin. I don't think that Bitcoin is the only solution or the end-all solution. It's a good solution. And part of the reason why is because, unlike the fiat currency that the Federal Reserve puts out, they're not making more Bitcoin. I know it's more complicated than that. People can mine Bitcoin and stuff, but basically, with the cost of energy being what it is, mining Bitcoin only produces a little bit more Bitcoin in the grand scheme of things. For the most part, most of the time, there's a cap on it, right? We need a cap on our money, and we don't have that right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So now we go in it, obviously we're going into this presidential election, and I've said it before in this show that this is going to be the craziest year of our lives. Did you see yet the other day they had some type of cyber attack? Did you lose cell phone service in that?
Well, they say it's not a cyber attack. AT&T going offline. I don't believe that, right? You can tell when a dog's pissing on your leg, I think And if they say it was a technical glitch, but remember, this is an issue that affected people all over the country. It didn't just affect a small region cell phone service. Don't tell me there's some guy somewhere that didn't drink enough coffee one night and he tripped over a plug. That sounds like a bunch of malarkey to me, to quote Joe Biden. The 911 call centers went offline around the country, right? Massive IT infrastructure went offline. It had to be more than just a technical glitch. I don't buy it, but it's an election year, Kevin, so they're going to lie to you. They're always going to lie to you. They're always going to lie to you. But they'll lie to you more in an election year than they will in a normal year. Ergo, I think it's pretty obvious when they tell you it was a technical glitch, considering the ramifications and the consequences and the length at which it went on for, it's probably pretty unlikely that that's true.
Do you think that we could see, whether it be a massive cyber attack before this election? I'm talking one that like takes down the entire internet or the power grid. Do you think we could see something like that before this election, and who would do it?
It's very possible. So Iran, China, Russia, that's the new axis of evil.
Mm-hmm.
Gone are the days. It's funny to think the old axis of evil was what? Germany, Japan, Italy. Those people aren't even have babies anymore. They're completely castrated, cuckold societies. Sorry, Germany, Italy, Japan, if you're watching this, you don't procreate. German and Italian and Japanese engineering is fantastic, but their societies have basically been hoarded out to foreign governments, and they become very weak, sadly enough. The new axis of evil is Russia, China, and Iran. And now they're the people we need to worry about. They're very friendly with each other. Russia and Iran are selling oil and gas and petroleum to China. China is hosting banking efforts and doing mass production of manufacturing for the whole world, really, but certainly for Russia and Iran. Russia is selling arms to Iran. Iran is buying arms like crazy. And now we have what's called the BRICS nations. The BRICS nations in Brazil, Russia, it's India, and South Africa, right? And there's more countries joining by the day.
Yeah.
Expect that to become more. Expect Turkey to become a big part of it. Expect Iran to become a big part of it. And anybody else that we don't have a friendly relationship with is going to find themselves at home with the BRICS nations. And in doing so, American sanctions will become irrelevant and pointless. And boy, this administration can't sell us out fast enough. Joe Biden took away those sanctions we had on Russia, allowing them to complete manufacturing of the Nord Stream pipeline, allowing them to have the monetary influence they needed to invade Ukraine. And now what did we learn over the weekend from the New York Times? The CIA had 18 bases in Ukraine dating back to 2014. We are the Ukraine war. Ukraine is the 51st state.
Yeah.
And we're funding them. That's not going to end anytime soon. This is World War III. This is the beginning of the end. We're there. When historians look back on this, they will look back on it and they will say World War III probably started in February of 2022? Is that when Russia invaded? Right. So we're 2 years now into the war. Yemen, Israel's involved. Venezuela's about to invade Guyana. Guess who Venezuela is friendly with? All the BRICS nations. So that's it. That's the future. And oddly enough, you wonder what happens with Brazil and India and all of this, because we're still friendly with Brazil. We're still friendly with India, but they've gotten off the dollar standard. Smart, but smart for them, bad for us. What comes next? What comes next is a great question. But I always like to point this out to people. Nobody called it World War II until it was almost over. Roosevelt didn't call it World War II until 1945. And they didn't call it World War I until World War II was a thing. It was just called the Great World War, and they didn't call that till years after it started. When Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, believe it or not, a German world leader, not an alternative rock band originally, that it wasn't called World War I. We didn't know that. So I would say, yeah, we're in World War III, and it's not showing signs of slowing down anytime soon. So what happens to the American economy? What happens to society? What happens to the West? We're truly living at the end of the new Roman Empire, and it's a sad thing to watch. I feel like the band on the ship on board the Titanic playing our last silly song as we sink into oblivion.
Yeah, and look, man, I hate that I feel the same way because, it is we have American, we have that fighting spirit in us that we don't want to end, but, it just sucks that our leaders sold us out, and our leaders are more concerned with the borders of Ukraine or the borders of Israel than they are the borders of our own country. They're more concerned with illegal immigrants than they are the homeless on the streets. So I see what you're saying, man. But, as a young person, a lot of young people, they're feeling hopeless right now. So I want to just ask you, Kenny, like the American dream, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Do you think it's even still alive?
Yes, of course. Absolutely. But these are things, these basic rights that you have, these basic freedoms that you have were instilled in us not by the Constitution, but by our Creator, right? They will always exist. Yeah. They will certainly they will exist in the post-apocalypse. Never give up on that. We will not necessarily have the affluence that our parents had. The baby boomers really effed us. How old are you, Kevin?
38.
So you're just a couple years there. I'm 41. So you're a millennial. I'm a millennial. I really feel bad for the generation under us. You're in a building right now. Do you own that home?
It's my mom's house, but I'm in a garage apartment.
Okay, but you own it. Right?
I own a few houses. Yeah.
Your family owns property, right?
Yeah,
I own this condo in the city, right? The people that are 10 or 15 years younger than us, Kevin, they got it real bad. I really feel bad for the Zoomers. But the thing that's frustrating so much is young people are generally lean to the left. These young people realize the system is broken. They're blaming capitalism. It's a very ignorant thing to do. Don't blame This is not capitalism. Capitalism didn't get us here. The invisible hand of government got us here. That's not capitalism. Capitalism is free trade. Capitalism is I have a service or a good, and I'm trading it for your service or a good, right? And for commodities, services for. That's not what this is. This is closer to socialism or Marxism simply because the government has screwed with our currency. And that's something that's very terrifying to think about.
Oh, it's really terrifying. Look, Kenny, man, I appreciate you stopping by, y'all. We are running out of time. Kenny, where can my audience find you at, man? You on Twitter?
So two ways to find me. My name's Kenny Webster. I co-host the biggest morning show in the South. It's called the Walton and Johnson Show. Every afternoon, I have a show of my own that can be heard on our flagship station in Houston, Texas, called Kenny Webster's Pursuit of Happiness. And like you, I'm a liberty Republican. I'm a conservative, but I'm an American and I'm a Christian first. I'm a Catholic. You can find me online, Kenny Webster. I'm on Twitter all the time. I have a Facebook page that was shadow banned. Sadly, I'm on Instagram. I use it a little bit, but Twitter and on the radio. Subscribe to our podcast. The Walton and Johnson Show has a smartphone app, and you could find both the morning show and my afternoon show on it. It's free to use, and we're on every major podcast platform for the time being. The great thing about that app is if they deplatform us from other services, we still have the ability to put content on the app. So find us there.
Awesome, Kenny, man. I appreciate the time. I definitely want to get you on in a couple more months, maybe closer to the election. We can break down some stuff.
I'd love it. Yeah.
But anyway, y'all give Kenny a follow, and we are out. Y'all have a great night. Peace.